Hey guys, welcome back to Cult of Film. I'm back here with Truman, and this week we are discussing a film that I really only became aware of back in around 2019. A filmmaker friend introduced me to, and little did I know that this film, a German science fiction film of all things, really seems to be nucleus of influence for movies like Blade Runner, Total Recall, The Matrix, and the film we're discussing today is World on a Wire, 1973, directed by Werner Fassbinder, the great German Wunderkind director, and starring Klaus Lowitsch in the lead role. It was shot in 16 millimeter and it was made for German television in 1973. And while it doesn't lean on a lot of what we would think are staple sort of special effects for science fiction, what it does do is it offers us sort of a futuristic sort of sci-fi corporate intrigue. And watching this again after so many years, I'm really seeing so many aesthetic nods, especially films like Blade Runner and others. But what did you think, Truman? This is your first foray into Fassbinder, isn't it?
Yeah, I had never seen any Fassbinder films, and I was really impressed by this. I think, I could see in this a lot of both influences on it and, like you said, kind of how seminal sort of this film is. The influence of it in not only in the specific films that I really like, but also kind of on the sci-fi genre as a whole. It gets into these really kind of heady concepts about the nature of reality and how you can trust your own senses and all these things that are kind of like sci-fi genre staples. And I think it explores them very well over the course of its really long runtime.
Yeah,
So I
it
really
was
enjoyed
split into two parts. We should tell
it.
people. By the way, you can see this on Criterion Channel. So much of Fassbinder's filmography is available there, kind of just perpetually, along with Andrei Tarkovsky. Um,
Mhm.
and yes, this was made for German television, so it's in kind of an odd format. It's two 90-minute episodes, if you will. And it sounds like a lot, when you think, German science fiction, but it's really compelling because it has that sort of corporate intrigue that I think if Blade Runner focused just on the Tyrell Corporation, I can kind of feel like that's what this movie is. It's the corporate side of the Tyrell Corporation, of whatever that corporation was in Total Recall.
Right.
So that, the people that are running the maintenance behind the Matrix, and yeah, it deals with, like Truman said, it's very high concept science fiction, especially for 1973.
Mhm.
Everything from androids to cybernetics to simulation theory, uh, really really interesting, and it still held me. I was really curious watching it with you guys if it was going to hit as hard as it did the first time I watched it, and it actually was better because I'm seeing, again, as you mentioned, how seminal it is. You see the threads. You look into this movie and you think, oh, wow, that's, yeah, I could see archetypal bits and pieces in the character of Fred Stiller, who is the
Mhm.
lead, who, while he's a scientist, kind of acts and dresses like a noir detective from the 40s. There's so
Yeah.
many eclectic, fun, sort of stylistic mixes in this movie that you can see, oh, okay, I see a little bit of Deckard in this guy at this moment, or I see a little bit of Rachel in this character. So I think if you're not familiar with, or you're reticent to watch this, again, if you're familiar with The Matrix, Blade Runner, any of those, you would enjoy this, I think. And again, it does so much for not having a budget for uh, what we would consider special effects in the early 70s. It's all in camera, it's all acting, and all those techniques really pull it off. But please, I'm really curious to know what you think, man.
Yeah. And so, like, obviously, it's very interesting because of its seminality, the
Mhm.
way and this is one of the things that's always so interesting about getting into older films like this. You get to see kind of the genealogy of film and how things evolve and how different ideas resonate with different directors and then inform their own work. And in this film in particular, for being, what was it? It was 71 or 73. Yeah, 73. There was a
Yeah.
lot that there's a lot of influence, and I want to get into. We'll get into that plenty too. But I think for me, the thing that stands out about it the most is the set design and the
Hmm.
overall art direction and aesthetics of it, which are crazy. For as seminal as the film is, it is
Hmm.
incredibly unique from a visual and aesthetic standpoint. Not
Yes.
even in like the traditional, filmmaking way in which you would say, oh, say for instance a Tarkovsky film. It has a very distinct visual style and the way that he uses its camera. And obviously, Fassbinder has that as well.
Hmm.
With like the crazy crash zooms actually are nuts. Like
Yes.
it's the kind of thing, today we kind of associate crash zooms with Tarantino and this
Hmm.
kind of like exaggerated and melodramatic kind of like action that we see in westerns
Right.
and other like blaxploitation films,
Right.
but that's a style that's very much of the 70s and the way that we think about it, and we see Fassbinder using it a ton. And it was a little jarring at first,
Mm.
and even after I got used to it and knew it was coming, I
Hmm.
still kind of found myself laughing when we get these crash zooms. Someone turns around and yells at someone else, and we punch in really hard on their face. I'm like,
Right.
okay, that's great. But
I love it for those reasons. That it's
yeah,
like bring up Tarantino, and no one on the film scene, in recent memory, is more influenced by the '70s. And I think that's another really great, charming quality to World on a Wire is that it is quintessentially '70s. We were kind of talking just a little bit as we were watching that you could see it was clearly made in the '70s, but it are aesthetically, in terms of the set design, costume design, has bits of like the '20s and bits of the '40s, and then
right.
bits of the contemporary '70s.
Hmm.
So again, it really has a neo noirish feel. It has sort of an Art Deco look in some of how some of the women are dressed, but then it has
Right.
this very German, shiny, mirrored, um, stainless steel sort of look to it that does give that and the whole thing being reflecting back on reality. One of the themes that sort of goes through it is what is real, who am I, how do I know
Mm.
I'm real, those types of things. Again, questions that pop up in Blade Runners. Okay,
Yeah.
if you're not earthed, are you real? Do you have a soul? What does it mean to be real? What does it mean to be human? Those types of things.
Right.
the, they did a really great job with, like, there's some of like the video monitors that the corporate honchos talk through actually would work today. Like, it's a
Mhm.
beautiful setup. I don't know if maybe they were experimental televisions at the time in the '70s in Germany, because the Germans, again, with their engineering, they're always ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But it makes it such a unique film to watch. But then it has these familiar bits of, like you said, the crash zooms, these sort of, I guess, what you could say are sort of tropey things that you'd expect from something in the '70s. But it works. Like,
Mhm.
there's can't remember any moments in this movie where I'm just like, what? And
Yeah.
Fassbinder has in his filmography, he does have movies that I probably wouldn't recommend to a mainstream film buff friend of mine. Even, you can deal with our we can watch art house, but there's some stuff that, he went through a clearly depressed period, and there's a
Mm.
couple of movies that I just couldn't get through, and one movie
Right.
that was I got through, and I appreciate it, but I'm like, man, this guy was going through it. But
Yeah.
World on a Wire, I think, is one of the best introductions to Fassbinder's work. He dabbled in everything. He did period pieces. He did science fiction. He did slice of life. He did crime. He did noir. Talented dude. So I was excited that you responded so well to such
Yeah.
a unique film, but responded well to Fassbinder.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I want to echo what you said about just like the visuals of everything, just how incredibly 70s all of the furniture and the clothes and the hair are. It's awesome. And although a lot of it is, it's very representative of the era that it's in. It's kind of like the Matrix in the sense that it
Mhm.
creates this kind of the Matrix is very much a 90s movie, but it creates its kind of own very unique world that is that is still of the time, but kind of separate from just like the quote unquote real world.
Right.
I think it's very interesting for that. But like I love all the like acrylic,
Yeah.
like clear acrylic furniture, and all the mirrors. And all these crazy, like crazy leather couches and the oranges and browns, everything that you think of with the 70s. And Fassbender does, spends a lot of time with the camera specifically. There's a lot of conversations that happen within the movie, and we have the camera kind of rotating around them so that way
Mhm.
we have the furniture passing in front of the characters in the foreground. And it's really just kind of giving us a lot of time to sit with it and taking the conversation, but also like look at all the furniture and how everything looks as well. And I think that it really it's not like a super necessary part of the film from a narrative standpoint, but it gives us a really great sense of the world. And I think part of it is like the desire on Fassbender's part to like show off a little bit. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
we put
Oh,
all this
yeah.
money and this
And he
effort into
does that.
the
That's
stuff.
circling
Like,
around cast members and sort of establishing almost sort of like this sort of God's eye view around characters is something
yeah,
that he'll revisit throughout his career.
yeah,
And I, before we get, we've really dove into the aesthetics and the visuals of it and sort of like the aesthetic influences of the time. I think
mhm,
I definitely want to explain to the viewers kind of the basic narrative of it is it does surround this guy named Fred Stiller,
mhm,
he's one of the chief scientists for the IKZ Corporation that is dealing with an intelligence, a machine, a computer called the Simulacron 3 that basically runs simulations on how will the grain market be affected next year. Basically, they're dealing with AI and sort of using AI in this world to better predict, productivity and business. It's sort of like this hyper corporatized future that we're dealing with.
yeah,
And the lead guy, Klaus Lovich,
yeah.
is really, really good. He actually would later in his career go on to play a TV detective in German television. And you can
Okay.
absolutely believe it because you look at this guy, he's kind of got a rough, athletic sort of look. And even though he is this chief scientist, as I mentioned before, he again dresses kind of like a noirish detective from the 30s and 40s. And
Yeah.
there is something happens sort of at the top with the big wigs, and I don't want to say exactly. I don't want to reveal too much if you guys do
Mhm.
watch, and you really should. Again, if you are a high concept sci-fi person, or you like any of the other sci-fi movies that again came that were clearly influenced by this movie, you owe it to yourself to watch this film. But it's a lot of sort of corporate intrigue. It's a lot of what's real, what is illusion, and the lead Klaus Lowich, he's really really good. As are the entire cast is
Yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely.
A lot of Fassbender's regulars are in this. Fassbender recycled a lot of actors throughout his career, but you could totally see this Klaus guy. He could even there's times where he's almost sort of a James Bondish type character. Like
Mhm.
there's so many different archetypal looks that this guy goes through, which when you realize it's dealing with AI and simulation and it really uh, it sort of explains why you've got all these different uh, and the mix of looks and aesthetics and designs, which again, it was so evocative of the original Blade Runner. You have like super
Yeah.
futuristic looking buildings and then women dressed like they're from the 40s. All that stuff is so baked into this, but please.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, Blade Runner's aesthetics are, I think, because it's Blade Runner is much more explicitly sci-fi. This is that kind of like light sci-fi, the kind of stuff that we would see a lot in the 70s, where it's just this kind of regular person getting caught up in this sort of like Hitchcockian kind of
Yes, it is very Hitchcockian.
story.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think Blade Runner's aesthetics are much more distinctive in the sense that they were so instrumental in spawning the cyberpunk genre, and they've been kind of built upon for the past 40 years. But it would feel kind of weird, I think, to have a film that like was made today that was like, oh yeah, I want to do World on a Wire aesthetics, because it's the kind of thing, again, it's so of the era. But I
It's
really like
interesting. It's interesting you
oh,
say
sorry.
that, because as I was watching it this time, again, I'm looking at it through a little bit more critical lens, and I feel that the movie does have its own aesthetic. I
Mhm.
Because I was looking at it just in terms of like, you'd have to refine it. Like, I thought about like, what would I do if I was remaking this? Let's say,
Mhm.
like some massive budget to make a feature film of this. What would I do with it? I obviously still keep sort of the detective noirish looks. I definitely
Mhm.
keep the Art Deco and 20s looks. Um, Maybe pared down some of the 70s. Like, I wouldn't have the flares on the men's pants, which kind of always takes me out anytime I see bell bottoms. What's going on?
Yeah.
Uh, but everything else, the texture was great. Like, you'd have like these, like you said, the acrylic and the see-through and the mirrors. So it's sort of very polished and futuristic looking. And then it would be in an office with this dark wood furniture and like a green couch. And I really like sort of the stacking of the textures, which that's Blade Runner. Blade Runner is just, it's all, whether it's Deckard's apartment, or it is the apartment that um, what's her face, the Daryl Hannah, and
Right.
they take refuge in. It's super eclectic. So that you do have that in this movie. It's not maybe as sharp, but you could see where if you wanted to, you could take these looks and so sharpen and shape them a bit and make it
Mhm.
even more aesthetic than it is, uh, for sure.
Yeah. And I really in particular love the use of mirrors that film has.
Hmm.
There's so many mirrors in all of the sets. They have some sets that are just entirely, wall to wall mirrors.
Right.
And it's interesting in a narrative sense because, thematically the film is about this notion of like, well, what is reality? What, things are, what if our world was like a copy of a copy of a copy, and the use of mirrors reflects that.
Right.
We have many shots where characters are standing, kind of a corner of mirrors, and the camera will move around them, and we'll see them in front of the mirrors, and then we'll see the reflection, and we'll see the reflection of the reflection, and we get that very regularly and consistently throughout the film, and it plays into that notion of like, well, there are so many layers to as what could be a simulated world,
Right.
and because of that, I think that thematic tie-in prevents that the use of mirrors from coming across as like this kind of accept like too hokey.
Right.
It feels
And they do a
it
really
feels
good,
much more motivated.
because it does deal with, again, within this world they have this computer that runs these simulations, for the betterment of the sort of hyper corporate economy in this future world.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that they have a few, it kind of keeps you guessing. Like, it doesn't, like, there are times where it's like, oh, okay, I saw that going that way, and then there'd be other times where it takes you in a completely different direction, so it's not completely predictable. Obviously we're talking a bit about the themes and the ideas that it deals with,
Yeah.
but in no way do I think this movie is predictable. I mean, maybe parts of it are, but I enjoy the unfolding of the story and the narrative as we're watching this, as we're watching Fred Stiller. Sort of, he's on, sort of, again, on the beat. He's like a gumshoe trying to solve what I guess I could share. He's trying to solve this
Yeah.
murder that's happened within the IKZ Corporation, aka Terrell Corporation. Uh, and it's really fun to watch this guy who is pretty confident about what he's doing, and occasionally getting sort of unmoored from that and then snapping back to it. The use, I would say, the use of how women are adorned, how they're costumed, their makeup, their hair, really gave me Blade Runner vibes because it's almost a hyper stylized. You have these women that look like they came out of like I don't know, a German music house or bar in the 20s,
Yeah.
which and kind of looks really actually kind of cool in a futuristic story, kind of like Rachel again having that very 40s look in Blade Runner. It
Yeah.
just kind of works. You kind of buy it, and it's
Mhm.
fun. It's also fun, I think, in this film, is trying to figure out who's who. Like, I don't know that it's that much parallel to Westworld, but you do. There is a fair amount of guessing of who's legit and who isn't, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed that a lot too.
Yeah, I think that there is a because of its length, there is a lot of kind of intrigue in that, like you were saying, that kind of traditional noir thriller sense. Yeah, and I think it maintained it fairly well throughout the film. I think there were times when I found myself getting a little bit lost as far as like, who is who and what
Right.
everyone's relationship is, especially in the beginning, because we
Hmm.
just kind of jump right into it. And I find that kind of happens to me a lot when I'm watching foreign language films.
Right.
That are more narratively driven like that, and where it's very important to keep track of like all the characters. Sometimes
Yes.
that can be difficult
It
in
is. It
English
is a
film.
big cast of characters, and you have a lot of these different these different scientists and these different sort of corporate officers, all of whom have German names for the most part. And not to say that these guys all look the same because they don't. By the time you're
Yeah,
halfway through, I think the part one, you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is Volmer. Okay, this is Karstensen. This, it takes a little bit of time to get, like you said, adapted because it is a foreign language film.
yeah,
And beginning, it's like, okay, they all have mutton chop. They all have mutton chops. They all have ugly flared pants, and they all look sort of very very severe and serious. It's like who's who, but it doesn't take
yeah.
long. You do get into it, and it's again, it's fun for something that was clearly made for German television for so long
Mhm.
ago. Still be this compelling and this interesting is really a testament to Fassbinder, who for those who are cinephiles and know, I mean, the guy was really prolific. I think he produced 40 films in the 37 years of his life. He died pretty young, but World on a Wire is, I mean, it had my mind going in terms of what angles of all these things haven't sort of been tapped yet by a lot of sort of major Hollywood films. But again, just fun. It had the fact that there's no, I'm trying to think if there's a single moment in it that we see a laser beam or we see nothing like that. There's no
Yeah,
lightsabers, there's no laser guns, there's no lasers. There's all of it is done auditorially through the acting, through the camera technique, and it's really impressive. Like, I would love to see contemporary directors challenged in such a way. Make me a science fiction film with no effects.
yeah,
So that alone should get you to watch this because it really is effective.
yeah. There's a lot of that kind of lo-fi sci-fi that you'll see in the 70s, and I think to kind of like varying degrees of success. There's stuff like Logan's Run and Westworld that they've got like kind of these big sets and whatnot, but it's not like this crazy sci-fi thing. But whereas, like for instance, Logan's Run feels very hokey. Like there's a lot
Yeah,
of
it did,
stuff
yeah.
in
Some of
there.
those did not age well at all,
Like
which is
it's really poorly.
yeah,
But I think, again, like the World Noir's emphasis on kind of like the big concepts of
yeah,
sci-fi is, I think, what makes it still interesting today. If we were supposed to still be impressed, like by how cutting edge all
Hmm.
the technology in this film and all the set design in this film was, the use of like rotoscoping. They use rotoscoping for like a one shot. If we were supposed to be impressed by that, obviously it wouldn't have held up. But it just goes to show that like an interesting these sci-fi concepts, even though the like kind of material technology surrounding them changes and evolves over time,
Right.
the ideas surrounding it remain interesting and are kind of timeless. That's why Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov and
Right.
like all these films and stories can continue to be remade in different eras, because these notions about what it means to be human and the nature of our reality remain interesting to us. And so
No, exactly. And you
it
hit
ends
the
up.
nail on- I've been saying Blade Runner, Blade Runner, Blade Runner, but
Yeah,
this does feel like, if you didn't know who wrote it, and I told you it was a story from Philip K. Dick, you'd absolutely believe it.
one hundred percent.
If you're familiar with Dick's work, beyond even Blade Runner, you would absolutely believe that this is what something he did. And what's again doubly impressive about this is it's rather high concept science fiction for a time when they did not have any visual means to really represent it. I mean, we saw, what was it? It wasn't until Interstellar that we saw a depiction of what, four-dimensional space on the screen in that movie
Yeah,
at some point. And so much of this, really, this dramatic intrigue sci-fi drama, it hinges so much on the pure craft of it, the psychological aspects of the acting, and I'm just so impressed with it, really.
yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I think a lot of the aesthetics as well remind me of a movie I brought up after we watched this, which is Jacques Tati's Playtime, which is, and Tati is a very interesting filmmaker because his ideas are not very. He's not a sci-fi filmmaker by any means,
Okay.
but a lot of his ideas and themes that he deals with are like this kind of sense of alienation that we feel as a result of technology. And World on a Wire is absolutely about that as well. This notion that like, through technology makes us kind of less human. And because of that, it separates us from people and, is enough to drive people crazy. But yeah, the color palette in particular, Playtime uses a lot of grays.
Okay.
Um, and World on a Wire has that. Like, there's a lot of gray, and in particular, it has this like kind of steely blue
Yes.
aesthetic to it that is. It feels kind of futuristic, despite feeling dated as well,
Right.
because it's the '70s. It's a very weird kind of like dissonance you feel while watching it.
Right. It
Not
really,
not
watching it this time, the colors, like you said, it's very metallic, very shiny, and there's those sort of that very cold blue. But there was quite a bit of green in it as well, and that's when I started thinking. I was like, wow, very Matrix. Like there were certain scenes that you could just see the green or the blue sort of come across, the frames of the shots, and I was like, wow, this just is so reminiscent of the Matrix. I don't know if the Wachowskis have ever seen this movie, but I'd be shocked if they hadn't.
Oh yeah, well, I would bet anything that they literally, there's this one scene where um the main character he's in sort of the simulated world that he's created, and he gets out using a phone, like using a
Right.
telephone booth.
Yes, yes, yes,
And it's
exactly.
like that the Wachowskis had lifted that, straight from there. And also, yeah, the color grading in particular, the way it's less explicit because, with the Matrix, it's like you're in either the Matrix and everything's green, or you're in the real world and it has more like neutral tones. But here, it just kind of has everything be this kind of metallic blue, or these very stylized and dramatic colors, which, again, I would be shocked if the Matrix, if this wasn't something that the Wachowskis looked at extensively
Right.
um, when planning out the Matrix.
For sure. Yeah, there has to be some influence there. I
Mhm.
In terms of, I was thinking, obviously, if this movie wasn't 3 hours long, what would I, and it's something that we've sort of done in, previous episodes, what would sort of be nice little, like in a double bill with this movie, what would you throw? Would you put playtime in sort of this area because of what it deals with? Because you keep bringing up playtime, which I haven't seen. I do want to watch, but like in terms of if you were in charge of programming, like what would
Yeah.
you put in this programming, either double bill or programming block? What would be a nice complement? What sort of, again, this is a very, very specific type of film, but I'm curious what, because I have my own ideas, but I'm curious to know what you think.
But I don't know if I would do playtime. I think that'd be a very funny movie to do a double bill with, because it's the aesthetics specifically that kind of are similar, but it would be, I think, odd to put them together. But there are a lot of movies that I think would go along with this very well. Solaris, I think, is a great pick for being in the same vein as this. Obviously Blade Runner, The Matrix. Maybe you could do like the original, like the Westworld film.
Total Recall.
Total Recall, especially. Total Recall, I think, would be a good one too, because it has this kind of levity after this. World on Wire, it's all very serious, and very heady, and very German. And then
Actually, what, it's quite interesting. I remember I rewatched Total Recall earlier this year, and if you look at the opening and how the credits roll in the opening of World on a Wire, they roll the exact way in the exact same style in Total Recall. So clearly, Paul Verhoeven, who directed Total Recall, it would make sense that somebody like he probably was familiar with Fassbinder, literally down to the opening credits of the film. The way it opens, it's exactly the same as World on a Wire. So I definitely have people, and again, you're right. There is a little bit more levity in Total Recall, at the same time still taking the sort of high concept sci-fi themes seriously. So Solaris, another good ones, because Solaris is, because it's Tarkovsky, it's an existential science fiction film. It deals with high concepts in a sort of dramatically philosophic way, as opposed to pew pew, what we expect.
There's nothing wrong with a little bit of that in your heady sci-fi as well. But I agree. I think this is, it's a more interesting, kind of more mature, I guess more stereotypically European in that sense, sci-fi, in the sense that, it's grounded. It's not all cowboys and samurai.
Right. In a way, it almost feels it sort of feels more German. If you will, because it's like when we think of Germans, we don't necessarily think of comedy. We don't think of people. Even though Germans are, can be very fun-loving people.
Yeah, and there's some good jokes in this too. I will say I was surprised, but there's a couple of good ones that that got me. So
that was the thing is Fassbinder, for as German as he was, his entire career, everyone from the actors that he worked with to the critics that reviewed him, kind of felt that while he was German, he was very un-German, and un-German in like his ambition, his ambition in his artistry. It's not something that you do as a German. You do practical things. You do, you become an engineer, you become a mechanic, you become an accountant. You do these things that are useful, not necessarily artistic. And he strikes a nice balance, I think, in World on a Wire, in that it is fun, it's intriguing, it's compelling, it's so interesting to look at. Again, there's certain scenes that I kind of want to do screen captures from, just to make them like my screensaver, or the back of on the back of my phone. There are some really beautiful shots. Again, despite the fact that it's early 70s, and so on. I want to bring it back to the women. The women all have a very almost alabaster doll look to them.
Yeah, they do. It's very interesting.
Right, which is fun because it kind of you kind of wonder, it's like, okay, is she just really nice, or is she one of the Stepford wives? Like there's several moments in the movie where you just kind of like, she real? Like, is she, you know, an android assistant? What is she? And that's again one of those things where it's just fun. You'll see again Fred Stiller, you know, the main character. You know, he'll be having a conversation with some person, and and you'll be like, okay, yeah, this is a real person, or then God, I don't want to give too much away, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's he does a really good job of keeping you guessing, which
Right.
was half of the fun of the recent Westworld series for me.
Mhm.
Is okay, who do you trust? And again, just so much fun. But yeah, definitely. You could pair this with the Blade Runner. You could pair this with Total Recall. You could pair this with Solaris. I feel like you could probably also pair this with maybe. Well, I was going to say Stalker, but maybe not Stalker. Stalker's
Yeah.
a different thing. Those are good. I'm going to scroll down here and see if we have any. Oh, you know what else I thought was fun, which again also kind of gave me Blade Runner feels, were these sort of lounges and these sort of, I guess, nightclubs of the future where you
Yeah.
would have, they would sing that German sort of love song Lily Marlene. You'd have sort of these sort of not Brauhaus, but these singers that everybody knows. Like even if you've never been to Germany, even if you've never watched Zelig or any or what is it? Trying to remember that one musical that takes place in Germany. I'm blanking on it right now, but yeah, and just this mix of and you look at some of the singers, and it's like, again, is she real? It's
Yeah.
so fun, and again, there being scenes where you'll have people that look a certain way, and it's like, what is she doing in this scene, or what are these fellas doing in the kitchen? There's
Right.
again, I don't want to give too much away because it's half the fun of watching the movie, but it does give you sort of, going back, you sort of have to wonder. It's like, okay, is this where they're talking about the simulation? Is this when they're in the office in the real world? Like, where are we here?
Yeah. I
Really
think
well.
so much of that is accomplished just, in very kind of simple, practical, low budget ways with makeup and hair. Like it's not, there's no crazy special effects, no, not like with the original Westworld. You don't see like circuitry in people's arms and faces.
Right.
It's just like, people that got kind of weird looking makeup on that makes them look a little funky.
Yeah,
That's kind of
you'll have a woman who's just a little too shiny.
hmm
She's just like, wow, she's got really good skin. Is
yeah.
that skin? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, or like I forget the woman's name, but I think her name is not Ava. That's the love interest, but his secretary who has like the huge blonde hair. That's like
Yes,
really
I believe that was Ava. I believe that was
okay.
Ava. Yeah, she's quite striking, and you notice her immediately. And even when she's in it's interesting. I couldn't tell if she'll be in the background of certain scenes. Like you'll have Fred or like other characters talking, and again, they're trying to solve this problem or figure out what's going on, and she'll just sort of be there. She's like this beautiful owl, like in the background, like you can't help it. Like I wonder if he had done that on purpose, as sort of like,
Mm.
is she? What is she supposed to represent? Is she just a beautiful woman, a secretary? Is she the panopticon? Like what does she represent? Like I would like to go down a rabbit hole again on this movie, just because every time, again, this is only my second time seeing it, but I'm
Okay.
seeing so much more than I saw that I've seen when I first saw it. And then when I first saw it, I was gacked out on coffee and just really fucking focused. And
Yeah.
I'm just again seeing things again like Blade Runner, just seeing so many different levels to it this time around.
Yeah. It's not I think it is the kind of film that really does, I imagine, would benefit pretty significantly from a second viewing, just because there's so much, and like it kind of takes a minute in the beginning, and I felt like I missed a lot of stuff early on in the film just because there's so many things happening, and in addition to the idea that there's like reality is kind of shifting a little bit, so you go, wait, like I thought that guy was someone else, and all these things. And so, you know, it
I
works
was
because. Oh
sorry,
yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to make a correction. The big buxom blonde is not Ava. It's
Okay.
Gloria from Gloria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So sorry.
it's a good name for that
Yeah. Right.
character.
Yeah. I
But
was incorrect. She dominates. She dominates actress Barbara Valentine, who was a staple actress in a lot of Fassbinder stuff. So sorry, I just wanted to correct that.
yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, I think I would really like to rewatch it at some point. I think it would also benefit from kind of like splitting up in two parts as well. I think having it be these two separate 90-minute chunks makes a lot of sense,
Right.
both structurally and from like a viewer's perspective. Like I could see myself watching the first part of it in the morning, and then going and having lunch, and then watching the
Yeah.
second part in the
Yeah.
evening.
There's a lot packed in there. You know, not unlike say like a Nolan film. You know,
Yeah.
with Interstellar or Inception. And Inception actually might be another really great pairing with this.
Yeah,
Uh,
but the having to be all the levels. Sorry, not to cut you off. Yeah.
yeah, no. I think that might be another one. It's interesting. I want to read. It's in the description of this film at the Criterion Collection. It says, "World on a Wire is a glory." And we probably should have started with this, but whatever. "World on a Wire is a gloriously paranoid, boundlessly inventive take on the future from German wunderkind Werner Fassbinder, with dashes of Stanley Kubrick, Kurt Vonnegut, and Philip K. Dick. Fassbinder tells the noir-spiked tale of reluctant hero Fred Stiller, a cybernetics engineer who uncovers a massive corporate conspiracy
Mhm.
at risk, virtual reality as we know it. Originally made for German television, rediscovered 3.5 hour labyrinthine, satirical, surreal look at the world of tomorrow from one of cinema's kinkiest geniuses." And it's interesting. And again, we've only
Yeah.
started down the Fassbinder rabbit hole, but I think probably because this was made for German television, uh,
Mhm.
Fassbinder had to sort of tame some of his inclinations. He
Oh,
will throw
really?
kinky stuff into his films for no reason. There's
Yeah, because
one,
there's still
one
plenty of that in this too. I'm surprised to
yeah,
hear
I mean,
that.
I guess that, yeah, there's certainly, the sexuality aspect to it, not unlike some of the girly bars and girly shows in both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
But Fassbender does it sort of on a different level, and you'll see as we continue to watch his stuff. And I encourage everyone, if you don't know who Fassbender is, and I don't mean Michael Fassbender. This is
Also great.
Binder. He's really worth a watch. I don't know how much of his catalog will be super appreciated by the average viewer, but if you're somebody who can deal with international, can deal with a little bit of surrealism, can deal with some art house, he does have a lot to offer, whether it's something very sort of mainstream, like I would say World on a Wire is a mainstream sort of adult, mature science fiction epic. You
Mm.
have things like he does another film that I don't understand why it's not further up on the list of what the critics really love from him. A movie called Chinese Roulette that I think is one of his best features. He did it in the later 70s, and just another really textured film, a bit of a thriller, very Hitchcockian.
Mm.
And yeah, again, but he'll also throw his kinky little touches in there. Same thing with his other big one or one of I should say one of his biggest is Fear Eats the Soul, or it's also known over here Ali. Fear Eats the Soul, and
Mm.
that's another one that's worth watching. So World on a Wire, Fear Eats the Soul, Chinese Roulette, and even though I guess, in terms of kinky, they get increasingly kinkier. You have Fox and His Friends, which was another one of the early Fassbinders that I watched. I'm trying to remember. I think the first one I watched of his was um, Love is Colder Than Death, which is one of his first crime noirs.
Okay.
1968, black and white, fun, really fun. He did like three of those. He did Love is Colder Than Death, Gods of the Plague, and The American Gangster. Those
Yeah.
three kind of make a fun trilogy. and then I think I watched Fox and His Friends, which is sort of it's a kind of a gay love story. I hate to reduce it to that because that's going to block a lot of people from watching it.
Right.
But Fassbinder himself plays the main character of Fox, and he's sort of a simple kind of guy who kind of gets swept up in a situation, but it's still really good, still really well shot, and well acted, well scripted. And then his last film ever that he did is a film called Querelle, Querelle, and it is very set piecey. It sort of centers around a sailor who's out on leave and deals with a lot of sort of sex and sexuality and sort of power plays, and it's very set piecey. Literally, like so many of the sets clearly were built and painted, and you can see that very much in that Japanese style that Tarantino would copy for Kill Bill. And so it's like we're models, we're going to paint. We could do this on a stage, we could do this outside, but no, I'm going to paint a sunset, and we're going to act in front of the paint, and not unlike what Schrader did with Mishima. And so Querelle, so Querelle being, and sadly, it was Fassbinder's last film. He did that in that way, so he went out on top. And I think in that film he got Jean Moreau and Franco Nero, the original Django. So Jean Moreau, who was a queen, a legend of French cinema, the French New Wave, that's when she popped up, and then Franco Nero, who's a hero of Italian cinema, the original Django, are both in Querelle. And
pretty cool.
It's deals with some very kinky themes. At the same time, it's also very vulnerable and real, and deals with universals. Fassbinder, again, it's a shame he died of an overdose, I think, in 1982, and I can't help but wonder if we still had it, like even if we had it for 10 more years. He had very much been beaten up by life. He lost several lovers towards the end of his life, and I think it was just very unbearable for him. He acted in one film before he died called Kamikaze 89, which is also a lot of fun. He plays kind of like if Deckard was kind of a fat, drunken Blade Runner. That's who Fassbinder's character is in this movie. And yeah, he did that, I think, right after he wrapped production on Querelle. Like he did that in the same year, and then he overdosed. And you can kind of tell in Kamikaze, he does not look good. He's got like rings under his eyes that look like, he does not look good. But it delivers an amazing performance in that film, and still directed the living hell out of Querelle. Fassbinder, he packed really a lifetime of film into a very short span of time. The guy did 40 films on top of doing plays, on top of he did 2 television series, one of which I can't stress enough. It's called 8 Hours Don't Make a Day. And all this is the whole thing is on Criterion Channel. Those of you that are film buffs, if you don't have a subscription to Criterion Channel, you are missing out, because it is a treasure trove of good stuff. 8 Hours Don't Make a Day is the happiest story Fassbinder ever told. He's generally not very good to his characters, which he read a lot of German philosophy, and German philosophers basically gave us the Third Reich. So a lot of this stuff just is not super happy. But again, he does very intense, very thought-provoking stuff. But 8 Hours Don't Make a Day was a family, what they call a family series that was made for German television. It was 8 90-minute episodes, or 8 one-hour episodes, or whatnot. And I am in love with it. I'm just in love with it. It's one of my favorite things of his that he's ever done, because it's also so different. It's a little bit lighter than his normal fare. And again, that's why I love this guy, is he can do a family series. He did another TV series called Berlin Alexanderplatz, which is sort of wartime drama that a lot of people have heard of. He had his mainstream features like Chinese Roulette, and Fear Eats the Soul. But then he's got like odd stuff. Like there's a movie, NA 13 Moons. What was that? Fassbinder. I'm looking it up here. I'm blanking on the. In a year with 13 Moons, which I probably will not watch again.
Yeah.
It will emotionally gut you, but it's an important piece of
that.
Yeah, he really, when he was making, he went through a period of like I couldn't watch Witch's Brew. I couldn't watch. There were a couple films towards the later 70s of his that I just couldn't watch. Other stuff was amazing. In a Year of 13 Moons really is worth watching. There's something there, but it's kind of like Darren Aronofsky's Mother. You're not going in for. It's just, ooh, it's a lot. You know, you watch that in the middle of the day on a Saturday, then you follow it up with a stand-up comedy special. That's all I'm gonna say. You know,
so, we ought to check it out. I like a downer movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a downer. I mean, there's a story there. It's, you know, I don't dislike tragedy, because the beauty of tragedy is it will touch you, it will move you, and hopefully remind you of what. Oh wait, I'm still alive. I have this great life. Oh, I'm going to call my dad. I need to talk to my dad. That type of stuff. He kind of does. I don't think he ever made a purposefully nihilistic film, but he was reading a lot of Schopenhauer when he did 13 Moons. And, you know, anybody who knows Schopenhauer, he's just kind of pure pessimism. I don't know why people read him. I don't, you know, so it doesn't make for a fun movie, but it's pretty thought provoking. It's about a transgender woman who's dealing with a lot on her plate, trying to hold her relationship together. And again, the way it's shot, it's just really beautiful. There's something very compelling about the look of Germany in the 70s, and whether World on a Wire or it's Fear Eats the Soul, In a Year of 13 Moons, or there's a movie he did called Lola, which was super sort of technicolor. There's something about that 70s German look and feel that should become, I'd love to see somebody take it and run with it. Like, you know, Tarantino has done with a lot of stuff. I want to figure out a way to take Fassbinder's 70s German flair and put it in a film somewhere at some point. But sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that in like A Clockwork Orange too. You know, a lot of the kind of that the way to put it. Yeah, just the overall aesthetics and like the kind of clean, the clothes people are wearing. I can't quite put my finger on it right now, but I think that's another.
Clockwork Orange is another great example of a film that really mixes the aesthetics of different eras into sort of its own thing.
Yeah,
really, that's another one that I don't know that I would necessarily pair World on a Wire with Clockwork Orange, but there's sort of that old Europe aesthetic that mixes with the quote unquote futuristic look of the time of the movie. That you see parallels there, which is kind of fun. I love funky mixes like that.
If we were if I were to put out another comp too that I thought of, are you familiar with the show Serial Experiments Lane? It's an anime from I think like 2002, 2003.
Yeah. I can't say that I necessarily watched it, but I remember when it came out. I remember it was on Adult Swim for a while at one point. And isn't it about a young woman that kind of disappears into chat rooms, or like disappears into the internet or something like that?
That's a part of it, yeah. I think it deals with a lot of things thematically that World Noir does. You know, again, these sci-fi concepts about what reality is and all of these things. But I think similar to World on a Wire, it has a very strong sense of aesthetics in terms of representing this kind of otherworldly, you know, kind of place inside of a computer. And again, without getting too much into spoilers, like with Lane, even more so, Lane is even more explicitly stylized in a sci-fi sense, where in Lane we can kind of we always see this kind of like technological world of the internet, like literally bleeding into reality.
Oh, wow.
And I think the influence from World on Wire feels very clear there as well.
Hmm.
Although World on Wire obviously, doesn't is not animated, so it can't depict things in quite the same way. But
Right.
that specific idea is really present, I think, in both of them. That I think would be, I would lock that in as my like double feature pick. Oh, it's
Yeah.
a 26. It's a full TV series too, so that's like
Right.
9 hours of watching that you're going to do.
Yeah. That's interesting. I kind of like, it takes a lot for me to get into an anime TV series these days, but maybe I'll go back and watch Lane because now I'm really intrigued. I don't know
Oh yeah,
why
100%. You
I
should
didn't
definitely break that.
watch the first time around, but the premise of it sounds really fun. That sounds really
Mhm. Yeah,
um,
and so it's a very well executed show. It's yeah, so similar narratively as well to World on Wire, where it kind of deals with these mysterious deaths and disappearances.
mhm.
There's also this element, I think, in World on Wire, of kind of cosmic horror. This notion. You get that in the Matrix as well. This notion that your existence might be, just inside of a computer and purely
Right.
a simulation. Um, and I think maybe something like, if you're familiar with the work of Junji Ito, he's a manga artist, but he did this series called Uzumaki, which also kind of has this similar vibe of like this notion that, like, if you just kind of peek beneath the surface of reality, there's this whole world that, if you were to really understand, you would go insane. That's something that
Hmm.
exists. That's a really central part of World on a Wire, and is present in Lane, and it's a core part of Uzumaki as well. So that'd be the other one that I
What
recommend.
does Uzumaki? What and something I've kind of noticed about
Yeah,
manga anime is it's almost par for the course
yeah,
now that everybody's using the Japanese names of them, whereas it used to be translated. Uh,
yeah. It means a
Uzumaki,
spiral. Yeah,
it just means spiral.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
all about Uzumaki is all about like these it seems kind of weird to describe. You kind of just need to read it to understand, but it's about like these spirals that kind of invade a town essentially, and just kind of everything within this town is consumed by spirals. It seems a little silly, but uh Junji Ito's art is really horrifying, and is what sells, again, what should kind of feel like a sort of hokey, weird concept, as something that's really disturbing. Um,
Yeah, that
yeah,
is it. I get one of the, it's interesting because I enjoy movies like World on a Wire
mhm.
for the high concepts, but when
Yeah,
I hear someone out in the real world talking about simulation theory, I
yeah,
just want to just tell them to shut up. I'm like, no,
yeah,
this is real, and I know this is real because I can't just decide I'm going to level up my character here in real life when something's not going well. And if this was a simulation, I could do that. That
yeah,
said, I think it's a fun premise to work with that I guess sort of ties into I guess the multiverse because if you're running multiple simulations, you can technically have multiple U's and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
I Yeah, there's a part of me that would love to remake World on a Wire. That like just sort of just elevate it. Do what Tarantino does so well. Tarantino takes B movie and exploitation movie concepts
Mhm.
and levels them up to cinema level execution.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
kind of wonder, what would if you took World on a Wire and you handed it to Nolan, like, whoa,
yeah,
that could be that could be fun. I'd
yeah,
love to see what he would do with that. And it's that, and it's already of that level of treatment of of the ideas, which is again why everyone should watch it. But
yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot more on this one because I really don't want to. I don't want to spoil it for anyone because you should see it. And we're gonna, and, you and I, we're gonna. This is just the tip of the iceberg for us with Fassbinder, and I could literally do the next 4 or 5 episodes just on Fassbinder films. Obviously, we won't do that. We'll break it up for people, but yeah, I help us out with the algorithm. Are there movies you guys want to hear about for us to review? Would you like us to do more Fassbinder, more, I don't know, Tarantino, whatever it is you guys have an interest in? Obviously, we know what we like and what we enjoy, but let us know. Is there something even more esoteric than World on a Wire that we don't know about? Because I love discovering and rediscovering stuff. I'm game if you are.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, the stuff like I don't know why I'm thinking of this movie, but what is it? Dangerous. It's Dangerous Kind first. There's a movie called, was it Dangerous Encounters of the First Kind, which has nothing to do with Close Encounters of the First Kind, but it is it's a Hark Sui film from the 80s that it's fun. It feels like it was adapted from a sort of very, I won't say nihilistic manga, but sort of a tragic manga. Dangerous Encounters of the First Kind. It's again, has nothing to do with World on a Wire. It's just something that popped in my head. So I won't. It's something that I'll add to the list. But anyway, guys, yeah, thanks for watching. Check out World on a Wire. Check out Fassbinder. And yeah, we'll be continuing to review more of his stuff. He's so important. A lot of his stuff still holds up, despite some of his very art housey stuff and some of his weird indulgent stuff he did when he was super depressed because his friends kept dying. He's a really solid dude. World on a Wire, Chinese Roulette, Fear Eats the Soul, Fox and His Friends, Carell, and a whole bunch of others. But yeah, I appreciate your sitting down and watching this one with me, Truman. I'm glad that you dug it. It's one of those where it's like, man, I could see this going one way or the other. People liking it or not, because it's, again, it's periody, it's very heady, and if you're not open to it, I could see people not digging it. But it was fun.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing it up. I think it was a really great place to start getting into Fassbinder. So I'm
and I keep seeing that damn beautiful Perfect Blue poster behind you, and Perfect Blue right now, there's a Criterion. I think the Criterion version is on Criterion Channel of Perfect Blue. Maybe that'll be the next one we dip into, because it's one of my favorites ever. One of my absolute favorites. So
yeah, me too. Top 5 for me.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Satoshi Kon. All right, guys, we're terrible at ending these things. So thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. All right.